First of all, bonus points if you get the subtitle of this. Raise your hand other than Diane. Okay, Diane knows. Anybody? Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick, right? Right? Or How I Stopped, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb was the original subtitle. I'm trying to sound hipper than I am by saying Insta. Okay, to talk you through, I stripped it down to the bare bones, but I got to tell you a little bit about media and how ad-supported media works in order to show you how different it is in, let's say, social, but really by social, I mean, not only Facebook, TikTok, but also YouTube, Google, definitely Instagram, even to a certain degree, Apple, and even what's happening on your laptop browser. But in order to tell you how that's different, I'm going to have to compare it a little bit, just a tiny little bit, to how ad-supported media works in television, because it's the closest precursor to digital, okay? So when I talk about ad-supported media in traditional sense, I'm not talking about newspapers or radio or any of that. I just want to compare it to television. There are strong parallels. Television was really running the show up till the end of the 90s when digital started to creep into the scene. By the way, it's now well more than half of all advertising dollars spent are spent online. Well more. And that's crazy when you think about how much, like, we all know how much a Super Bowl ad costs, right? So television ads still are very, very expensive, but digital is far more than half the pie. It's been that way. I don't know. The last time I spoke about that at a conference was like 8 or 9 years ago, and it was already half. So I don't even know what percentage it is now. So I got to walk through a little bit of traditional stuff. Then we're going to talk about digital stuff. And then anyone who's ever gone to my church, me being me, we're going to nerd out a little bit at the very, very end. Okay, so I just want to start by telling us a little bit about how advertising supported media functions, right? Advertising is always about getting the right message in front of the right person to buy the right product at the right time for the right price. In other words, we all kind of intuitively know that there is a difference in different audiences for different ads, right? If you're watching a football game, okay, if you got two people that want to advertise a product, one of them is selling shampoo and the other one is selling pickup trucks. Which one's going to be more likely to advertise during an NFL game? Good job. Which one's going to be more likely to advertise during daytime TV at 11 o'clock in the morning? Exactly. Did you guys know that soap operas have that name for that reason, by the way? A lot of times, by the way, advertising, when you're a consumer like I was before I got into the media business, it can kind of look a little bit like the tail wagging the dog to see how it actually works. Because I think, oh, they're entertaining me. And as a secondary thought, they're showing me these ads. It is 100% the other way around. Like 100%. That's why soap operas are called soap operas. They wanted to sell soap, so they backed into the content they want. You understand? It's not like someone said, we should have whatever, telenovela, The Young and the Restless. I almost said telenovelas. They're far more entertaining than the English version. In any case, we kind of all get this intuitively about how ad-supported media functions. Hold on, I'm just trying to figure out how to forward my slide. There we go. Cool. Okay. So it works like this. There's content created to attract a certain demographic. Let's just say, because we're going to talk about TV for a minute. So let's say like Friends, the TV show Friends. Remember that in the 90s? You're too young to remember. You don't remember it. Okay, fine. You make the show Friends, right? There's a distributor, in this case, the network, right? It's NBC, it's ABC, it's CBS, right? Those were the first three. There are a lot more now. But that distributor of the content is then going to also sell ads. That distributor then serves the ads to the people that watch the TV show, in this case. Hopefully, the people that see the ads do something. In this case, go buy a pickup truck or a bottle of shampoo. And then the advertisers change the message every so often, right? There's kind of two main types of advertising. I'm not going to get into them. It doesn't much matter. But there's kind of a broad one that's just called brand advertising, where you're like, Toyota is a great pickup truck. And then there's called direct marketing, which is like, buy this specific pickup truck at your local dealership. You see? And there's a big spectrum. Like the Toyota is a great pickup truck stuff is going to be shown nationwide, if not worldwide. The really specific localized stuff that's trying to get you to actually buy a thing tends to be a lot more localized. Doesn't much matter. Suffice it to say, this is the general model. Now, it matters that depending on what you're trying to sell, you're going to have a different tolerance for what you pay to have different advertising. The examples I give here are pretty stark. If I'm making a baby rattle that I sell retail at Target for $7 and it costs me $5 to manufacture it, then the profit margin is only $2. I'm going to have a pretty low amount of money I'm willing to put behind advertising that baby rattle because I only pocket $2 every time I sell one, right? Now, if on the other hand, I'm selling a cancer drug that's $8,000 a month per prescription, right? I'm going to be willing to pay a lot of money. That's why you see a ton of pharmaceutical advertising, because they only have to sell, they don't have to get a couple of people to change their mind about taking a drug, because those things tend to A, be very expensive, and B, tend to be subsidized by the insurance industry. So for a variety of reasons, pharmaceutical companies are very, very willing to pay. One of the last, so I've been out of the tech game for like four years now, three, four years, whatever. The last time I looked at it, the highest what's called keyword rates, which means the rates that you're advertising or the words that you're paying to put ads up against, the top 3 across all of the internet were like mesothelioma and 2 other medical conditions. Because if you can sell medication for that, right? So anyway, the point being here that to sell a baby rattle, you want to advertise on, say, a Disney cartoon, the amount you pay for that ad, you're going to be willing to pay a lot less for it. Disney's going to want you to pay as much as possible, right? But as a manufacturer of baby rattles, you're going to be willing to spend a little bit of money. As a manufacturer of pharmaceutical drugs or cars or mortgages or anything that's like really high profit, high ticket items, do you understand what I'm saying? You're willing to spend more for the advertising. So the rate starts to matter quite a bit. So again, the overall kind of goals here, and I'm going to get out of the technicalities of this fast and into the fun stuff, is just get the right product in front of the right consumer at the right time for the right price. Keep something in mind. This is important. This is in television. This whole model changes, especially the right time and the right consumer. This part assumes that you're behaving a certain way. You're going to flip on the TV to watch Friends, or you're not. And I'm trying to get my ad to do this work based on whether you turn the TV on or off. When the thing I'm advertising to you on is in your pocket all the time, this equation totally changes. It's one of the main points of tonight. You understand? This is traditional advertising. It's like, you guys are going to watch Friends or you're not. And of course, I can do things that say next Tuesday on Friends and try and get you to tune in, right? I can have Jennifer Aniston on morning talk shows and get you excited about next week's episode of Friends, right? All of which are things that they do, or I did do in the 90s anyway. Maybe they still do. I don't know. I don't have a TV anymore. That's a whole different story. Different info talk next year. The point about tonight is that the way that advertising has worked has drastically changed alongside the evolution in technology that's happened really since I graduated college, so in 2004, bless you, in a big way, starting in 2007. Anybody remember what happened in 2007? Aside from the fact that I started working at Google and Google bought YouTube. What was it? The iPhone was what I was thinking. The iPhone launched in 2007, summer of 2007. I remember waiting in line for it, as a matter of fact, because I am a nerd. Now, we got to talk a little bit about these things, but I'm going to start peppering it in with spicier stuff. We're getting toward the paprika part of the recipe. So we got to talk a little bit about targeting, right? Targeting simply means, remember that equation? The right ad in front of the right person at the right time for the right price? Okay. Targeting means the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. That's all targeting. The way that targeting worked in television was big time about trying to get an ad in front of people that looked like people that might want to buy a truck. Broad strokes, targeting is put pickup truck ads in football games and put shampoo ads in, Oprah or whatever, right? That's general targeting. That's an extremely gendered targeting that I just gave you. But, you know, when this stuff was developed, it was the 50s. And there just factually were more women at home watching TV at 11 o'clock in the morning than there were men. And there were more men watching football games than there were more women. So that's one-to-many targeting, by which I mean, I fall in, from an advertiser's perspective, I fall into a group of people that look like somebody who would buy these dorky khakis. You know what I mean? So like for example, maybe I read the New York Times instead of the local paper, or I read the Wall Street Journal instead of the New York Times, or I subscribe to the New Yorker and not People magazine. Do you understand? There's demographics. You see how, by the way, I'm defining that based on media, because those two things are tied together big time. That's one-to-many targeting. People that look like somebody who might want to buy a truck is who I'm trying to advertise to. What's happened in tech, and I think we all kind of know this intuitively, is what's called one-to-one targeting. So one-to-one targeting is literally the standard now. For anything that's not TV, everything digital is targeted to you individually. Now, that doesn't mean the ad you see for a Toyota Tacoma is going to say like, hi, Stephanie, like buy this thing and then show all of Stephanie's favorite things or whatever. It does mean though, that they are serving it to you based on your, if you're online, if you're on a social media platform, Google, YouTube, whatever, it's being served to you individually. I'm not even close to the creepy implications of this yet. It's not just the fact that you're getting the ad that's specific to you, because it gets deeper. Stay with me. Everyone has wanted to do this since the dawn of advertising. Everyone. If this was people were trying to do it in TV before digital became a thing. I actually worked for a startup in 2003 when I was still in college for like a hot minute that was trying to do this kind of stuff on TV, on a TV level. They're trying to insert highly localized ads into the TV feed. But it wasn't possible because the data requirements weren't there. When we get online, though, we leave data trails of everything we do. And so there's plenty of data. There's plenty of data. I saw a talk last week at Stanford with Eric Schmidt, the guy who was the CEO of what's now called Alphabet, was Google for a long time, over a decade. He gave a talk that said that the problem with AI now is that it has eaten up every amount of data that human beings as a people for all of history have ever created. It's read every book, every magazine article, every newspaper article, everything that has been digitized. It's eaten up every piece of weather information, every piece of everything, everything you can imagine. And so now the challenge is creating synthetic data sets that they can feed to AI to keep going. So the data for this, we're way past that. You understand? Everyone wanted to do this starting in like the 50s in Madison Avenue, but they didn't have the data and they didn't have the technology to gather the data. Remember, does anybody raise your hand if you remember Nielsen surveys? Yeah, me too. My parents used to do them. I think they got paid like $100. Somebody sent them a paper survey with a pencil and it had a grid of the times a day, right? And the channels, and they would write down what network they were watching at what time. Nielsen was using, that's called ratings. You guys familiar with the term? High ratings. There was a guy, politician, who was always talking about his ratings. Anyhow, you know, that's what that means. It means a lot of people were watching. So that's what those used to be. It used to be Nielsen begging us to take surveys, and then we'd send them back, and some poor guy at Nielsen would, like, you know, type that all into a computer and create a database out of it. Now we're just giving that away. I'm giving it away right now, you know? Like my computer's tracking the fact that I'm giving this talk. My phone's over there. Anyway, that's not the creepy part. We're not even close to the creepy part. Okay. The cost of production is another variable you have to be aware of. The cost of production. The cost of producing content. So again, let's just compare Friends to, say, Facebook. The cost of producing Friends is very high. I don't know if you guys know kind of how Hollywood works. You probably have a general idea. I've never worked in TV or anything, but I kind of have a general idea. You got to get a bunch of money up front. You got to make a pilot. Sometimes it's millions, tens of millions of dollars. You got to build a set. You got to convince Jennifer Aniston to do it, and Courtney Cox. And even before they're big stars, because the show hasn't launched yet, you got to pay them something. Then you got to go pitch that to the network executive. Then they invest in the pilot and create a whole series, at least the first season of one. That costs another tens of millions of dollars, right? If it's like Game of Thrones, it could be tens of millions of dollars, right? Very, very expensive. There's a reason that those things only get made in Hollywood, right? Now, take that, compare it to a YouTuber. You know, I mean, hold your phone in front of you, walk to Trader Joe's, and you're a YouTuber, right? It's like practically zero. So this started to happen. And again, this is why TV is a good comparison for digital. This started to happen at the end of the 90s. If you notice, there was this flood of reality TV in the 90s, and it really took off in the early aughts. What do we call the 2000s? Aughts? Yeah, early aughts. This, I think, World's Funniest Home Videos is absolutely genius and probably 40 years ahead of its time in terms of media economics. I mean, this guy, whoever came up with this show, convinced you guys to send them the content. You had to pay for it. And they just were like, this is funny, and put it, you know, forget the sets in the apartment and like, you know, that you have to film Friends. Think about what it costs to film an episode of Law and Order. You got to pay New York City to shut down an entire block for like half of a day. And the permits alone must be $100,000 for 5 seconds of footage, you know? This model is amazing. People pay you to have the content. And all you do is put a guy in a room saying, that's funny, next video, you know, stupid cat, that's, you know, whatever. The real world, it's the same thing, right? I don't know if you remember, I don't know. The real world was genius. You had a bunch of people begging you to get on the show because they wanted to get famous. You didn't have to pay them anything. They'd probably pay you. Half of them would pay you. And all you did was rent a huge apartment somewhere or a house in San Francisco, or depending on whether you're an apartment in New York for season 1, a house in San Francisco for season 2. I loved the real world when I was a kid. But you know, all you did was throw a bunch of people in a house and hope that some crazy stuff happened. And you pay a couple, you know, for a couple of cameras and a crew, skeleton crew, that's it. Here's what matters about this. The economics of how much it costs to produce the media has a ton to do with the advertising you recoup from it. If you spent $10 million every episode, I'm just making this up, but if you spent $10 million to produce an episode of Seinfeld, which how much was it at the end? I don't even know. It's like he alone was making a couple $1 million an episode, right? Just Jerry. So not that Jerry. Well, was it? No. I don't know. There was some joke about the tithing drive. You get it. Whatever. If you're spending that much to make an episode, then you got to make at least that much advertising, or the show's going to go under. But when your cost of producing it is practically zero, you can do all kinds of weird and cool things with advertising because you don't have to have just big brands advertising against it. So social media grabs that idea and just completely runs with it. Because in digital, you can do all kinds of weird things with advertising because you don't have to charge a lot to have advertisers on it. That's why still to this day, for the most part, you get ads for like Toyota or like, you know, Dove soap, big brands on TV. In digital, it's always some kooky, you know, Dollar Shave Club equivalent of just like a dude in a warehouse, you know what I mean? Because they can afford that. And that's good for the media. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Just keep in mind that nothing is free. We used to say in Silicon Valley, if you don't pay for the product, that's because you are the product. Just let that, you know what I mean? If something is free, that's because they're making money on you using it. Nobody, trust me, least of all people in tech, are trying to do you a favor. They're trying to get rich. You ever tried to live in San Francisco? It's not cheap. Okay. Now, how the ads are actually paid. We're edging toward the creepy part. Targeting was just the beginning. This is the part you got to pay attention to a little bit, but really in the next part. How the ads are paid. This is subtle, but incredibly important. Okay. In TV, you take all the data you can get about people watching Friends. You look at it, it's, I don't know what it was, maybe 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. You look at, say, there's another thing from that time. Martin Lawrence show was at the same time on Fox. Now, you're going to notice when you look at if you're in an ad agency in 1998, and you're looking at the analytics between those two groups, you're going to have different demographics. So you're going to attract different advertisers to each show, right? Now, you're only paying as an advertiser you're paying for an estimate of how many people are going to watch the show. Because again, you can turn the TV off. They know that X number of, 50 million people watched Friends last week, and they're going to guess that another 50 are going to come this week. But if you all, whatever, there's a blackout across the whole country or something, it doesn't deliver, right? You understand? You're paying for an estimate. You don't really know how many people are going to show up and watch it. Okay. In digital, there's something called pay per performance. This gets really creepy, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But what happens is they're not paying for people that look like Bill. They're paying for Bill. So somebody, if Bill were on Facebook, are you on Facebook? Bill's on Facebook. Okay, cool. Somewhere right now, without, actually having your name, there is a person looking at you in a spreadsheet, probably at some point today, there was, saying, I want that guy. And Facebook only gets paid if they deliver to you as an individual, not people that look like you, but you specifically. Now, because the TV in this case is a thing you've got in your pocket at all times, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Just keep in mind, I only make money if Bill, not people that look like Bill, but Bill, come to Facebook in a certain amount of time. Okay. We are telling digital, did this turn off? Cool. All right. I think I can do without it. We are telling digital media all the time what we want. And we're telling it all the time what we want because the way that we search for things, the way that we browse, our very behavior online is a track of desires. Just think about it like that. It's the reason that mesothelioma and words like that are such high value words advertised for online is if I'm Googling it, I mean, sure, it could be I'm like an 8th grader writing a paper about it, but more than likely, especially if I'm searching it over and over and over again with different words attached to it and so on and so forth, sooner or later, I'm going to triangulate the fact that this person is telling me something based on what they search. All of everything you're doing online is teaching what's now called AI, but used to just be called algorithms. By the way, there's no distinction between that. I don't know. People think that AI just popped up out of nowhere when the term did like 3 years ago. AI is just an algorithm. That's what powered Google, before I started working there in 2007. So every time that we are telling computers anything about our behavior, which we're doing by going to websites, not just putting in a search box at Google, but every time you tell Instagram that you're more interested in this celebrity than your friend, or that, you know what I'm saying? You're telling it something. And all of that data, it's all basically telling machines what you care about. So who cares? Like the targeting alone is not, boy, they're all gonna, every mic, there we go. Yo, Google heard me, is what happened. I ain't scared of Google. I got God. We're in the chapel. The targeting alone is not scary. In fact, you could turn around and say, well, so what? I am interested in mesothelioma. I want ads about mesothelioma, or I do like kooky t-shirts. I love kooky t-shirts. The kind of things you just buy all the time online. You're like, how did that just happen? I bought 5 of these, In other words, it could be value to the user. And this is when I was at Google, that's what we told people. We were like, yeah, I give up. When I was at Google, that's what we told people. We said, it's valuable. You're just getting ads that are more relevant to you. If you're not going to buy a Toyota Tacoma, then why get blasted with a bunch of ads on it? And that would be true if it weren't for the pay per performance thing. If it weren't for the pay per performance thing. So this is the model you've got in digital. You have no content creation. How come? What's the content on Facebook? Posts other people make, photos other people upload, comments other people leave, a bunch of AI pictures. They have this much of a cost of producing content. Why? Because you all give it to them. Plus, in so doing and in so using their platforms, we're all telling it what we like and what we want. And they're like, I got a great idea. How about we just sell back to this guy what he's already told us we want, and we'll make a bunch of money doing it. That's essentially how this works. Now, we might want to wonder what all this means when we wrap it all up. This is the juicy part. If you've been spaced out, or you're like, this is too technical, or this guy, I don't dig his whole thing, now's the time to pay attention, because it gets interesting. Everything in digital changes, because it's no longer like the people that decide to turn on their TV and watch Friends. And of course, I can estimate how many of them there are and so on and so forth, but maybe they don't watch Friends. And if they don't get the ad. It's completely different in digital, because I can target Stephanie individually if I'm Facebook, and I don't make $1 unless I get her to come to the platform. The math isn't very hard. I'm now in the business of creating behavior, not matching my advertising to what behavior Stephanie's already exhibiting. I'm in the business of making it, manipulating it, getting her to come to Facebook more times than she would have otherwise, because I only get $1 if she does the thing I said. So think about that. If you flip a coin, what's the probability that it comes up heads? All right, you all passed the pastor's intro to statistics class. If it comes up tails and you flip it 100 more times, the probability that it's come up heads one of those times goes close to 100%. Really, really close to 100%. Every time I get Stephanie to come to Facebook, I'm flipping a coin that I get that $1, because I didn't get it until it comes up heads. You understand? So I'm 100% in the business of making sure she comes back, because every time it's a flip of the coin. And until it comes up heads, I don't get paid. If this sounds familiar, it's because you learned about it in 8th grade. You learned about it with behavioral scientists like Pavlov and his dog. Just to remind you at a high level, Pavlov realized that if he fed a bunch of dogs the same time every day, say 4:15, that at 4 o'clock around about, they would start salivating because they knew they were going to be fed. B.F. Skinner did the same thing with pigeons. He noted that you could condition pigeons to do various things based on a reward and punishment system. Now, an unfortunate fact of the psychological principles behind studies like this is that it can be used and is used all the time in social media. You've got, in Pavlov's dog, you have the cue, which is, hey, it's 4 o'clock. I'm going to get fed in 15 minutes, right? Which creates the craving. Ooh, now I'm salivating because I know I'm going to get that thing. The response, right, is the salivation and so on. And then the reward is the actual food, right? And as long as that cycle continues, the dog is always going to go through this cue craving response as long as it gets the reward at the end. Do you understand? Now, I put the graphics up, but you can see how this maps to most of our lives on social media, right? You get let's say you post something, I don't know, it's about a social topic or just a picture and you're not really sure if your friends will like it. And then you go into a meeting and your phone starts buzzing. You're definitely like, did they like the picture? Am I canceled because of the comment I said? I'm terrified of being. It's half the reason I'm not on social media. I'm worried about it. Because you get canceled for the most ridiculous thing. In any case, this is a real cycle. It's a real thing that happens in the world. Here's where it gets a little bit more nerdy, but also a little bit more interesting. There was a philosopher, he died a couple of years ago. His name is René Girard. He taught at a place called Stanford. Stanford is the school in Silicon Valley. Girard's big philosophy, as this quote says, well, let me just read you the quote. Man is a creature who does not know what to desire, and he turns to others in order to make up his mind. We desire what others desire because we imitate their desires. Let me try and read this to you. Remember the Pastor Pete paraphrase version of things? What he's trying to say is, we economists especially, from Adam Smith on, tend to tell us that we have a sense of our own innate desire for things. And we have a sense of how we value those desires. That's how we get prices in Adam Smith's model of economics. What Girard says is actually what happens is we look, when we're young, we look at something we admire and we want to like what they like. Don't think this is true. This is 100% how celebrity photos look. You know what I mean? It's not that I came out of my mother's womb really wanting this shirt. It's that I saw Ryan Gosling wearing it or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? We do this all the time. We've done this since there were print photographs. Incidentally, I just thought of this, but bonobos do this too. Ask me about it sometime. I read about this study where bonobos were given sugar, like Kool-Aid, and they would hoard it. They would save it, and then they would trade it for favors with other bonobos later. And the thing that they were willing to trade more Kool-Aid for than anything else was to see a picture of high-ranking males or female bonobos in their troop, so they could like fawn at it. It's People magazine. They would actually pay for it. They would give over their Kool-Aid in order to look up close and just like drool over a picture of like the top male or the top female in their troop. Isn't that nuts? Anyhow, this guy Girard is at Stanford. Lots of people come through Stanford. One of the people that came through Stanford, believe it or not, is a guy named Peter Thiel. Do you guys know who Peter Thiel is? Big time dude. Peter Thiel's been rich since we even knew what the internet was, kind of, more or less. And he took this idea, which, by the way, is 100% why Instagram influencers work, right? Don't think that you think that this sounds kind of convoluted and cerebral. It's not. This is really how a lot of things work. You look at something you desire and you end up desiring what it desires. It's like, it's 100% how influencers work on Instagram. Any case, Thiel comes through this class, and well, let me just let this article from Harper's Magazine last year kind of really brings this home. So Girard spent his entire life preaching the deadly dangers of mimetic desire. That's this theory that mimetic means to copy, to ape, like a mime, you know what I mean? So Girard spent his entire life preaching these deadly dangers of this theory of his, this evil force that must be contained at all costs. Peter Thiel seems to have come away with the impression that this mimetic desire is some pretty powerful stuff and that you can make a lot of money by letting it rip. Thiel took a warning sign and turned it into a manual. What does this mean? Let me tell you. Peter Thiel was one of the first investors in Facebook when it was still a closed network for just Harvard grads, and well before it had developed into what it is now. It was just basically a bunch of pictures and it had names attached, and you could friend people or they could friend you. There was no like button. Peter Thiel put $500,000 in Facebook and pushed hard to get a like button. Why? So that we could turn into reality René Girard's idea that we like what other people like. So if Stephanie's going all around Facebook, and I think Stephanie's pretty neat, and she's putting likes on everything, now I can think, oh, Stephanie liked that. I should like what Stephanie likes because I think she's pretty neat. And Diane, now there's two people I like doing it. So now you see what I'm saying? I triangulate my way into desire. So this is not a coincidence. This is 100% what happened, right? Peter Thiel learned this philosophy at Stanford, went to Facebook. Girard was like, no, this is bad. By the way, the outcome in Girard's philosophy, the outcome is like the Holocaust, is Nazism, right? And Thiel's like, yeah, but if we just put it on Facebook, we can make a ton of money doing it. So that's kind of neat. So just as Facebook is picking this up in its early days, they go through, this is about the time Thiel makes the investment in Facebook. The like button comes out and they do all of this ad targeting stuff where they get down to one-to-one targeting. So they can get Bill an ad for what they know Bill wants. They're starting to build the data set that makes it what it is today, right? The like button's been introduced. Now, I'm going to skip 2010, although native ads is a whole other conversation. 2014 is pretty interesting. The manipulation experiment is nuts. So what happened? We're not sure when they did it. We found out about it as the public in 2014. But They basically took a couple of groups, control groups of people, right? So within Facebook at that time, let's just make it up. There's a billion users or something. They take 100,000 over here and 100,000 over there. So it's not a ton, but they put them into 2 different groups. And they showed this group only negative stuff. Kids dying of famine, you know what I mean? Just bad, negative content. And in this one, they showed kitten videos and baby videos and whatever. And by the way, they have the technology even in 2014 to source this stuff. So it's not like they're making the content up. They're just taking all the stuff that they could show Diane from her feed. And for this group, they're making it all the cute stuff. For this other group, they're taking all the stuff that's in Bill's feed, but they're showing Bill only the negative stuff from his feed, right? So they're starting to be able to sort that.
Like, so for specific higher heat to do experiments on people, they don't have to do any of that, like run this by a body to see if it's ethical, none of that.
No, because they're just making money. They're not, it's not a peer-reviewed study. They're not doing this for the sake of science. They're doing this for the sake of money. You can do whatever you want. Amazon right now is probably running hundreds of what are called A/B tests on their website. I mean, they're doing it constantly. Facebook too. I would be, I don't want to over talk, but I would be shocked if it were less than thousands. They're constantly testing everything.
And my journalism students ask us a lot, and a lot of people have public accounts. So if you have a public social media account, it is fair game. You can quote that in an article. You can use it in a study because people are giving away that information.
Yeah.
Anyone can access it with a Google.
So what they learned from this experiment is that, because again, now don't forget, let me back up a little bit. I'm in the business now of making sure, because I've sold a future on Stephanie. I'm an advertiser and I've gone to Facebook and said, hey, if you can get Stephanie to do this thing with this ad in the next 3 months, I'm willing to spend $10. I'll give you $10 for it. And Facebook says, cool, but only if I get Stephanie to come in and do the thing, do I get the $10. Now they run this content experiment in 2014. And what do they realize? That people love to interact with extremely divisive content. Think about it. That makes sense. Period. Right? Like, look at the number of like comments on a controversial YouTube video versus like one of my sermons, for example. You see what I'm saying? You intuitively get this. But again, because I'm in the business of making sure Stephanie comes back enough times, I can flip that coin enough times and make sure it goes heads and I get my $10 from the advertiser, you better bet after this experiment, I know unequivocally that serving her divisive, hate-filled content that I know she's going to disagree with or agree with strongly, that's going to give me enough flips of the coin that I get my $10. Now, this is an interesting concept that is 100% baked into the way. By the way, I have told you nothing controversial. This is all in their annual statement to shareholders. This is just the business model. This is if I were explaining to you how a McDonald's worked as a franchise, it's the same thing. I'm not telling you anything controversial. This is all public information. If I want to tell you something controversial, I would show you how Facebook adoption rates, teen depression, teen self-harm, and teen suicide go up like that from about 2010 to now. That's a little bit more controversial because maybe it's correlation and not causality. This is not controversial. Okay. Intermittent variable rewards is a fascinating thing. What this means is a couple things about how like a slot machine works. First of all, I've never played a slot machine. I haven't. Maybe once on somebody else's dime. But I've been to Vegas and I've seen people play them. And I note that they have to hit occasionally or they're going to leave, right? Because you get that reward sometimes, it's absolutely to the advantage of the casino that you get it, but that you don't know when or why. So that's what's called intermittent variable rewards. What this means for your Facebook feed is, if I'm the Facebook algorithm or any social, if I'm the YouTube algorithm, if I'm anything that's recommending content to you, okay? I know for a fact, because of this experiment that was done in 2014, I know that you're going to prefer a cute kitten video, a picture of your neighbor's puppy, and this crazy political content. Okay, because those are the things that you responded to or people like you responded to back in 2014. However, I can't just give you those 3 things. That would be like giving you a payoff every time, it'd be like giving you a jackpot every time you play the slot machine. I got to tease it out. So I'm going to slot the cat video in pretty much near the top. But then you're going to have to scroll a little bit to get to the puppy video. Why? Because there's some probability in between the thing I know you're going to like and the thing I know you're going to like. There's a bunch of other content I'm not so sure about. But if you interact with it, flip of the coin, increase the odds I get that $10. Intermittent variable rewards. And this drives your brain crazy because our brains are natural pattern finders. So you got the dog video, a scroll or two into your Facebook feed, and you're like, ooh, why? What did I do? How do I get it again? You don't realize you're doing it, but you are. Another kind of cool thing about intermittent variable rewards and slot machines is, so remember how big I told you Facebook's offices are in Menlo Park? Remember how many people I told you floating around there with fancy degrees? Now, when you open Facebook on your phone, do you ever get the it's loading circle thing? Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you notice how you have to pull down on it? And so, I don't know if it still does. It used to make a sound. Like some things make a sound. Does it still do that? Yeah, right. Okay. Now, do you think for a second that those tens of thousands of Ivy League PhDs who do nothing because they don't produce any content and they don't produce the ads, they're literally not the farmer that makes kale or the nerd who wants to buy it. Sorry, that's me. They're just the farmer's market. Now, tens of thousands of Ivy League PhDs floating around. Do you think they can't make it load faster than that? Of course they can. It makes that sound and it does that thing just like a slot machine. It's no fun if you pull the lever and it just says 777. You got to watch it do the thing. You got to make it roll. Why? Intermittent variable rewards. Go back to this thing. I got to have this. I got to have the craving. I got to make you wait for the thing you want. And then I got to make you not understand why you got it. That's the intermittent variable rewards part. This is a fascinating guy. Jerome Lanier developed virtual reality technology in the late 80s. To the best of my knowledge, he's a billionaire a couple times over. He's a mainstay in Silicon Valley. And he pays buku dollars to send his kids to a Waldorf school. One of the major, it's kind of like a Montessori school, but for upper grades. One of the major touchstones of it is that they don't allow any technology. You would be hard pressed to find an executive, at least anecdotally, I can tell you this, in or around Silicon Valley that doesn't send their kids to a device-free school. Listen to this quote from him. He wrote a book, by the way, a real short book, terrific book, called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now. You could, to bring it back to the very beginning of the presentation, you can see that his visualization of that is the tail wagging the dog. So-called advertisers can seize the moment when you are perfectly primed and then influence you personally. I say so-called because it's just not right to call direct manipulation of people advertising. What might once have been called advertising must now be understood as continuous behavior modification on a titanic scale. This is where all those things I was telling you about targeting and how the ads are paid and cost of content production, it all gets tied together. Because I am no longer in the business of hoping that a certain number of people watch Friends and then doing my best to manipulate them while they're there. That's been happening since the dawn of television. Now I'm in the business of creating occasions for you to come to the platform. I'm creating behavior, not just manipulating it once you're doing whatever it is you were going to do anyway. I'm now making you do things so that I can manipulate you through my advertising. Frances Haugen, around the time, so I don't know if you remember, but Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress a bunch of times. And then right after that, Frances Haugen was a whistleblower. She was a product manager, which is what I did by trade, mostly as a consultant I did, but she was there at Facebook. She was embedded she worked there full time as a product manager. And was really, really alarmed at what she saw as the addictive potential of the platform. Most specifically, she was alarmed by the fact that for the right price, Facebook had convinced a bunch of people who were addiction psychiatrists, MDs, people who had gone to medical school, who used to treat people who had addiction, paid them whatever their price was to do this, to come into Facebook, not to help people with addiction problems, but to make Facebook more addictive. And again, this is public, this is disclosed in their shareholder report from a couple of years ago. So this stuff is not an accident, you know? So yeah, Frances Haugen went in front of Congress and testified about the addictive potential, especially around kids. It's kind of an interesting thing. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. Now, before I tell you what I'm going to tell you, clearly there could be some problems with China doing this kind of stuff, right? China can be a little authoritative about how they control things. However, the version of China, or the version of TikTok that China lets its kids see, cuts off after 40 minutes a day and ensures that every so many minutes you're on, you get some educational content, like Dora the Explorer teaching you like a word in a different language, or like a little funny science video or whatever, some kind of educational content. Now, again, that's the problematic part. Who knows what, they could also be like rah Chinese state or whatever. However, the point is, we don't have any such controls on our version of TikTok. I think that's a little bit creepy, considering what we think the United States is compared to China. They're more protective of their kids with social media than we are. I want to leave you with this thought. I love this book so much. And I love its comparison. Do you remember the two novels you probably had to read in like junior high, maybe freshman year of high school? One of them is George Orwell's 1984, right? In George Orwell's 1984, you got Big Brother, you got, the police goose stepping down your street, and that's how they keep people in line in that dystopian future. Then you've got, on the other hand, actually, weirdly, it was written before George Orwell's 1984, but you have Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World. It's written, like 10, 15 years before? In that book, there is no police state. You kind of can have whatever you want. You can take a pill to make you feel better. There are kind of these pleasure palaces you can go to. And so listen to this quote. Neil Postman says, in 1984, that's the police state version. People are controlled by inflicted pain. In Brave New World, people are controlled by inflicted pleasure. 1984, Orwell, feared that what we fear will ruin us. Huxley, the Brave New World guy, feared that what we desire will ruin us. I just strongly believe that Facebook is this giant kind of copy of a copy of a copy without an original anymore. It's a bunch of us desiring things that other people desire just because they're on Facebook. It's weird. I remember right after college, the first time I really grasped the idea that Paris Hilton was just famous for being famous. And it kind of blew my mind. And it felt weird. It also felt at the time that the president was kind of just president because he was the president. That was Bush too. But in any case, it was kind of like, well, he went to Yale, he might as well be the president. In any case, I note that that's just like the way things are now. Everybody's kind of famous for just being famous. You know what I mean? It's not like because they wrote a symphony or like, or good at football or anything. They're just kind of there all of a sudden. And like, we all end up wanting the thing that they want just because they were there. I don't know. It's kind of mind blowing. I really like this quote a lot because I really do think that what we desire is ruining us. And just to give my little pastor version or my little pastor twist at the end of this, I really, really worry about social media from a spiritual perspective. Not because okay, here are the two obvious ways that that's true. And then the third way that's a little more subtle. It is clearly a distraction. It is very clearly a distraction. And it's just kind of inherently tawdry, compared to other more nourishing things we can do with our spare time. You know what I mean? Go join the Pinewood Derby or something. I don't know. But the third thing is that it teaches us that our value comes from other people. It teaches us that our value comes when somebody hearts something we posted or thumbs up something we posted, comments on something we posted, retweeted something we posted. And that just isn't true. Our value is not like this in the sacred world. It's like this, and we value each other because we recognize that we each have a vertical relationship with God and that God has a vertical relationship with us. And we're valuable because God made us in his image and because Jesus Christ died for us, not because other people. And I think that way more so than anything else I can think of in our culture now, this culture of just kind of transactional zero sum, like my thing, share my thing, and I'll like your thing and share your thing. It worries me that like we sort of are so comfortable putting ourselves in a position where not just our entertainment, but our value as people can be derived so strictly from other people instead of from some sort of higher power. I choose to call God, but yeah, cool. That's it. Thanks.